Emily Roger, host of the Boiling Point podcast. My co-host, Dave Vale, and I will bring you thoughtful discussions with leaders who are positively impacting our world. This is The Boiling Point, where leadership and inspiration meet. Dave, here we are again. Hi.
That's a new outfit.
It is. I am wearing a full-on Canadian tuxedo right now, which is kind of my signature outfit it's the same color denim from head to toe.
Nice. That's good. Well, I've got my signature working from home outfit on. And then, I do a lot of the coaching I do is by phone, and I really appreciate doing it by phone. And then occasionally someone will say, we should do this by Zoom or whatever, Teams or whatever. And I always feel the need to put on a shirt, a proper shirt and stuff. But this is the attire. This is
that's the proper shirt. That's the
so
coaching attire.
Yeah, 100%.
It's I mean, for me, even before pandemic, I have worked from home for so long, and I am the as morning person. And when I am working, even if it's on just phone calls and nobody is seeing me, I need to be dressed, have my hair brushed, feel professional in order to sit down at my office and work. So even if nobody sees me throughout the day, when people, and I mean, to each their own, I could not work in my pajamas.
No, and actually, I'm glad you're bringing that up, because to me, that's if I ever talk to some point and said, you know what, I was coaching so and so and I was in my pajamas, that's when you say, okay, Dave, and each to their own. But in my case, that's drawn. I don't know. There's a line I have around that because I think you got to make even the walking down the stairs into the home office, and this is our home office is separate from the rest of the house, is important, because it kind of gets, I don't know, I find it gets me in the right frame of mind.
Yeah.
I don't want to be doing it from, the living room or whatever. Right. So interesting, right? Yeah.
Just, the environment and the way that we, I think, present ourselves and no, for sure. I think I would break out into a sweat if I had to, try and do a coaching call in
well, a funny story is I was talking to a client, great guy. We're really good friends as well, but we were just getting to know each other, and I was coaching him. And I know we're going to talk about coaching with the guest that's coming up. And anyways, and I was not in my pajamas, but I wasn't dressed up. And he's a very wealthy, successful guy. And all of a sudden he goes, and which really doesn't have anything to do with the story, other than he goes, let's do I want to quickly show you this on Zoom. I went, oh, okay. And so I'm doing it, and I'm I'm not prepared to be, because I just felt and then it was a good little lesson in, just be prepared. Someone might, hit you up on Zoom anytime. So it was actually David Savoy. I've told him.
Okay. Yeah.
We're just getting to know each other kind of professionally, and he had no problem with it, but I was just not. It was me feeling inadequate, right? And
right.
I should look more professional, All the things we go through, and the doubts we have, and all those sorts of things. So I'm just seeding some topics that might come up, and I will warn listeners that our guest may turn into a host and switch roles on one of us, so we have to be prepared for that. So
He's probably run off to put on a ball gown or something after hearing this conversation. All of our future guests are going to come black tie.
or not. Gonna go.
Just no to way. Give me anxiety.
Yeah. Oh, I see. Yeah, that would be. Yeah, that would. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So speaking of next guest, Mary Anne Ivison, what a treat to have you here. Welcome to the Boiling Point.
Thank you for having me. Also, what if I appeared and I was wearing I changed into my pajamas just to spite you guys?
That, you know what, that would have been karma. We would have just been we got to change this whole intro bit, and we would have gone and re-recorded the whole thing. So that would have been good. That would have been really good. But you don't look like you're in pajamas. You look very very proper and dressed up, and in your, you said in your last professional environment, meaning not a studio environment, but like where you do podcasts and that sort of thing. Is that what you said?
Yeah, so I'm in my second bedroom, and I'm sure it'll come up in the actual interview too, and why this is special to me. But I'm in my office technically, and so my setup at my actual desk is just like my like USB microphone, my Rode. But so I don't have to really worry about echo or sound in this case, but it still sounds good. But I have like a little sound, not proofed booth, but like a sound treated booth right next to me with my fancy Sennheiser microphone, that, and it looks like it's a shotgun microphone. It's really great for voiceover. They use it in movies as well. But that's more the professional thing where I have to actually worry about sound and what it picks up. But here is just like I get to sit in my chair and I get to just like chat with you.
And sounds great
Does
from
it
my
sound okay? Good.
yeah,
Good.
100%. Where are you, like what, like where are you located?
I'm in Ottawa.
Ottawa, okay. I was wondering.
Yeah, yeah, and that's how Emily and I met actually several years
Okay.
ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So Mary Ann and I, we know each other, and we can get into that. But our first encounter, I was living outside of Ottawa, had just moved there, and the Gatineau area has incredible ski trails for classic and skate ski, and I skate ski but not very well. Like it is a full body workout. It is way harder than what it needs to be. I see people go gracefully. That is not me. Like every muscle hurts by the time I'm done, like even my toes. There's so much effort that goes into it. And so I signed up for skate ski lessons and a group lesson. And that is how I met Mary Ann. And it was like just this like immediate connection of like we are friends, we are two peas in a pod. It was love at first sight, and our poor instructor then had to put up with the two of us.
We annoyed him so much. And you know what's ironic still is that I do, his name's Liam, and he's been a guest on my podcast. We're all friends. I go to his Saturday morning ski club training, and he's coached Emily, and I don't know if he's coaching you now, but he's coached Emily for trail running. So I have to say a big shout out to like the Ottawa, Gatineau, Chelsea outdoor community. It's so small and it's so welcoming. It's so wonderful. That's why I live here, is for the outdoor community. And that's a whole big part of, what I do and why I do it and why I live here.
Yeah. And just the power of community and the power of like going out and trying something new and just being open to meet people. And then, yeah, the connections that are then made. And yeah, so with that, Mary Ann, obviously I know you. This is Dave's first time meeting you. And for the listeners, give us an intro.
So just like a generic about like who I am and what I do and all those things, right? Just
From
like a
from like your birthday, from the day you were born.
so you want a detailed journal.
Poor Liam.
Okay.
Yeah.
Poor Dave, in this case, poor Dave. So overview of my business and my life, is that what you're looking for?
However you want to introduce yourself.
Sure.
Loaded questions.
Sure. I'm like, what do you want from me? So I guess you could say I haven't really labeled it quite yet. But you could say I'm an audio professional more than anything. So I come from a 12-year radio background. I did radio full time for a while. I love that career. And then the last few years I was in it, I was like, I don't know what's going to be next. And it was kind of like simmering in the back of my head, thinking I'm not going to have to worry about this for a long time. But I was laid off in 2021 in the middle of the pandemic, and then I moved over to voiceover. I feel like you're going to ask me these questions, so I'll make it a little bit shorter.
Yeah.
But anyway, so entrepreneurship from radio to entrepreneurship. And I've started a voiceover business. I do radio contract work now, actually, too. And I started a podcast called Let's Take This Outside about a year ago. And I cannot believe where it is now. But I love them all for different reasons. It's all audio. I can do all of it in my pajamas. At this point, I don't record video. Everyone's like, you got to record video for YouTube. I'm like, ugh, because one of the reasons I'm resistant to videos, I'm like, I just like showing up in my booth and just not caring what I look like, but I need to change that mentality. But overall, I'm a audio professional and I work from Ottawa.
you can get a haircut like me and you don't have to worry about that because it'll be always the same whether you just roll out of bed or it's 8 o'clock at night. So just saying.
Good call. Good call.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So wow, what a leap. Like when you say I did radio, what does that mean exactly? Like were you
Sure.
like a host or hostess or whatever?
Yeah, I was on the air. So I did everything from I did mornings for years. I did middays, I did evenings, I did overnights, I did
So like
afternoons.
live radio and you're
Live
interviewing
radio, yeah,
people
live
and
radio, pre-recorded radio, all of it. I did a little bit of promotion when I started my career, but otherwise I was on the air most of my career. And I did every format too. I did rock, I did pop, I did mostly country, actually. I don't know if you like country music or not. But that was most of my career. And now that I do contract work again. I'm doing country, I'm doing pop. But yeah, I was on the air. I was you could call what would you call me? An on-air personality. But yeah, that's what I did for a long time, and it feels like a different lifetime.
sorry, Emily, I'm just gonna jump
No,
in.
go for it.
I was just thinking though, like I'm guessing that experience would be so helpful to like podcasting and that sort of thing, like just being used to being on the air, sometimes live,
Hmm.
like it just would prepare you to probably jump into any scenario almost. Because I found like, I'm thinking a long time ago,
Hmm.
someone interviewed live on radio and I can appreciate when people say it feels really awkward to be on video or whatever, because
Hmm.
I remember like kind of freezing up initially thinking, oh my gosh, people are listening. What do I say?
Yeah.
And I was like, I think I was being interviewed about hockey in Whitehorse,
Hmm.
Yukon, by the CBC or something like that. But it was that feeling like I'm talking to this microphone and a bunch of people are listening at the same time, and that has to be so kind of such fertile learning ground for jumping
Hmm.
on podcasts and that sort of thing, would it be?
Yeah, I would credit my radio career to how comfortable I am on a microphone, I would
Yeah.
say, right? The ability to be natural, the ability to be a storyteller, the ability to interview, I would say is one of the biggest things, be able to talk to people and have the conversation flow naturally and not don't those dead space. It's hard. It's a whole like interviewing people is a whole other skill, right? So
Mm.
I would attribute my radio career to that, but also that I worked really, really hard, right? And I worked full time in that career from the time I was like 20 years old, right? So I would attribute a lot of radio to a lot of the skills that I use every single day. And I have no regrets about how it all worked out.
How did you get into the radio to begin with?
So it's funny because I thought it wasn't until high school. Um, but then I found a picture of myself and I'm just like this little whiffet and I'm wearing just like a onesie, but it was Christmas time, and I'm wearing this little onesie, and I have like little mullet. I was probably like 5 years old, and you know those play school recorders where you could, it was like red and blue and white. Do you remember those? And you could like there was like a microphone, and you could talk over it and record. You can record the radio, you could record your voice. So I had one of those, and I remember when I was a kid, I would like record over songs and pretend I was on the radio. So I think it started way back then. I'll have to show you a picture, Emily.
Yeah.
Um, but then I always thought like I wanted to do like kinesiology or science because I love sports, and I was like not great at science. I always excelled in like English and and more like more the arts. So I decided to go into. I was like I'm going to do communications, and I ended up co-oping in a radio station near my hometown in Chatham, Ontario. And I'm like, I kind of like this. I like these people. This seems to fit. I applied to radio school. I went to Conestoga and Kitchener, and that's where I completely and utterly excelled in production and on air. And I absolutely loved it. And it was other kind of weirdos like me, and I was the kind of kid that would like not kid. I was at 18 or 19 years old, and I would take a bus like an hour across Kitchener just to like intern and learn. And I did a lot of on the ground training. Um, and from there I've jumped all over the place. I've moved probably 10 times all over Ontario, and ended up in Ottawa about 10 years ago and never left.
Um, so you get this really good education, I guess, right? In an environment, And so what happened? Like, how did the career end? You just described jumping into
Sure.
entrepreneurship. What was the transition? What kind of caused the transition, I guess?
Sure. Um, so it's hard for me to know for sure because they ended up hiring me back on contract. So I think that probably means that it had nothing to do with me and more just to do with budgets, but I try not to think about it too much. But I worked for a company called Bell Media. And here's the thing, and I'm not just going to say them, it's just media in general, radio specifically. There's been a lot of cuts. Um, and I was I think there's about, I don't remember, maybe 100 or so across Canada that layoff. Yeah, it was February 2021. And it was so weird because I got an email from my general manager. And it's like, and you see your coworkers get laid off every year for years, and you never think it's going to be you. And I remember getting that email and thinking like, oh, it's my time. And like I remember I just kind of blacked out for probably 24 hours or so, and I just like went in, and they like hand you the papers and you know what's happening, and they hand you the papers and you're like, I can't believe like I'm one of these people. Like I can't.
Mm.
It was, yeah, it was kind of like this surreal experience because again, middle of the pandemic, we were not really any of us are really mentally well at that point. It's February, it's dark, it's not like things aren't going very well. I had some personal things happen as well, so it wasn't a great time. And it was wild, and Emily and I talked about this too, is I remember from the moment I got laid off and thinking about those last couple years being like, what am I going to do afterwards? I'm like, oh, this is your chance. Despite being in a complete crazy anxious hole, I was like, if you don't this is where you try something else.
Mm.
This is it. Luckily I had a bit of severance and I was able to take some time off, but I didn't really take time off. All I was doing was networking and reaching out and figuring it out and being like, do I want to jump into it, into a full-time job again? What do I want to do? Um, so yeah, there was that weird transition point and that anxiety. And I don't know if I jumped to entrepreneurship in the healthiest mindset by any means, but my gut was saying you need to try something else. And I think there was a bit of maybe spite and anger that drove the you're not working for anyone else, you're gonna work for yourself.
And
To
you
be
know
honest.
what's so interesting about that is that, um, I've been, yeah, and I've probably said this too many times on this podcast over the years, but I was employed for all of 18 months in my adult life. And I felt more insecure about my future when I was employed. And it's nothing to do with, and it was all about me than I do being self-employed. Like some people would say, well, you don't have the security, but I'm like, I never really felt secure because I remember getting an email once where I was reporting to someone new. And to be fair, I wouldn't probably hire myself. Well, I wouldn't hire myself. Um, and the email was from this guy who was running stuff from the States, and it was on fire in Vale. Like he sent it to me by accident, right? And the feeling you had, I was like, oh my God. So I was like, what do I do with this? Right. So I forwarded it on to a VP, and I said, like he was very apologetic, and it was like a wrong way to let someone go. So I kind of had that in my back pocket. But it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like I don't feel secure, and bam, like that coming out of left field. Like when you're describing it, I'm like, oh yeah, I can totally relate to that. So you go to entrepreneurship, and then what? And you hadn't done anything like that
No.
before?
You know
Wow.
what's wild, and as you mentioned that, the media industry is very, and not just radio, TV, digital is completely taken over. It is the future. Creating your own content is the future. Owning your own content, I think, is super important as well.
Mm.
But it makes me like, it's crazy sometimes. I speak to some like former coworkers or friends who are still in it. And I'm not saying I'm never like I can't tell the future. I have no idea what my future holds. Maybe I'll work for a big company. I have no idea. But I see people with so much anxiety about getting fired and losing
Mm.
their jobs. And I'm like, it's actually, even though entrepreneurship is the hardest thing I've ever done, I would rather be on the side of being in control
Mhm.
than
Yeah.
someone else controlling my future. Because that, yeah, again, seeing people lose their jobs every year and being and like knowing what time of year it happens, right? That's so
Yes.
anxiety inducing, so unnecessary. um so at this point where I am, I'm like, no, no, I'm much, and I do know factually that i'm I'm where I'm meant to be at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I can relate to all of that as well,
Hmm.
from being, which feels like a lifetime ago, an employee to now, yeah, an entrepreneur, and thinking, gosh, like there are moments where fear sets in or
Hmm.
self-doubt sets in. And I think, oh my gosh, Emily, no, you need to get, and in my mind, I'm saying a normal job, which what does that even mean?
Hmm.
And then it's like, and Mary Anne, you and I have had these conversations of like when those moments pop up and what we do in those moments. But the majority of the time, 95% of the time, it's like, I could not, I mean, 100% of the time, I could not imagine not doing what I
Right.
do.
It's funny because I reflect on this sometimes. So, when I first started out, every day was get a real job, get a real job every day, right? Like multiple times a day, get a real job. What are you doing? Get a real job. And then eventually it was like once a week, get a real job, right? That anxiety, that like,
Yeah.
Yep.
that gut punch, right? Now it's like once a month. So I still so I still get it, but now it's like less frequent. I'm like, and I recognize usually it's just like stories I tell myself. It's anxiety that, it's maybe financial insecurity, or maybe it's a slower time in my business. And it's like, what are you doing? Why? But like, unfortunately, it still happens. And I hope it goes away one day. But now it's like once a month. And I'm like, it's like that like goblin in the corner of the room. I'm like, I see you. Like, I know you're there, but like, we'll just live with each other, and I'll just accept that this is still a thing.
I think,
Yeah.
I think it's a healthy thing to probably, like for me personally, like
Yeah.
yeah, same thing,
Really?
Why am I what? Oh yeah, why am I doing this? This is crazy. Why don't I just go back to just being me as a coach, like all these things, like, and then I go, well, no, I don't want that, or what? My wife would often say, Dave, we can always get jobs. And it's just like, at one point I said, please don't say that anymore, because I find that so depressing. Because I don't know what that, like to your, I guess Emily's point, like I don't even know what that really means.
Yeah.
And that's not, and I'm not like, and people love being, like there's great employers and there's great employment
Hmm.
opportunities. So I'm not, just everyone's built a little differently. So for me, because I haven't had that experience, I don't know what that would be. But I kind of use it as yeah, I'm choosing to do this. So kind of put your big boy pants on and just get out
Hmm.
there. And yes, there's going to be a little rest, Dave. Like, and I go through this whole process, but I find for myself as time goes on that kind of like you're able to get out of that thinking sooner and faster than maybe I would have 15 years ago.
Right.
As an
Yeah.
example.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. That
what is it for you guys? Like, what gets you out of that? Like I'm kind of curious for both of you. Like,
Mm.
there's something that kind of can pull you out of that downward spiral of thinking.
Oh
Mary
my
Anne,
god.
go for it.
What gets me out of that? I think it's kind of almost like the it's a mix of maybe some, like, calling Emily, calling someone that I know and trust. It's so, what's ridiculous is, I even had a coaching call the other day, like with a voiceover coach. And voiceover by far is a thing that is the hardest for me. It is, it's acting, it's a skill that like takes so much work. It's extremely competitive. And it's something that I struggle with the most. So I was, sitting in with a voiceover coach, and at the end of it, I'm like, I'm still struggling. It's been kind of a slow couple months, and she's like, no, no, you can't quit. Like, you're on the brink of something bigger. Like, you're gonna be okay. It's so wild to me that people around me believe in me sometimes more than I believe in myself.
Mhm.
So
Hmm.
um I really try to tap into like the people that I love or who love me, who, whether it's physically calling them or being like, "Oh no, like my coach just said like she truly believes in me," right? So I think reminding myself that it's hard to see it in yourself, right? So if other people are telling you this and aren't bullshitting you, you have to remind yourself of that. You're like, oh, well, everyone else believes in me, even if I don't believe in myself right now. So I should really like, I
Yeah,
should
they
probably
must be right. They have to be right.
maybe I guess they're right? Like that's one of the things I tap into.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, there's a few things. One would be to expect opposition and expect opposition from myself. In that I know that those feelings are going to come up, like all of those self-doubts, like that's normal. But then, okay, if I can expect it, if I can have a plan as to then how to deal with it, and then what that plan is like taking my thoughts captive and like that story, that narrative that we then can spiral into of like knowing ahead of time what the pattern of that is and being able to just catch myself in it, to just kind of, yeah, cast down that imagination of where my mind can so easily go. And I think for me, it's that like every single day being intentional in the morning of like what it is that ultimately I am doing through my work, and just staying so clear on that and the passion behind what I do and how it is just a part of me. So to
Mm,
not do it, to go and get that like normal job, that real job that like
mm,
I would basically be like giving myself up.
It would have to be the perfect job.
Yeah,
mm.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, so what have you been learning, Mary Anne, about being in this, kind of self-employed world and embracing entrepreneurship?
I saw the most hilarious Facebook, not Facebook, Instagram reel, or it was like a TikTok the other day, and the guy was like, meet my team, and he was like, he had like a mustache on, he's like marketer, and then like the next one he's wearing like a hat, he's like I'm the voiceover artist, and then it's like I'm the salesman, and he's wearing like something else. It's just like the funny, and like I know you can't see it, but it just makes me laugh. So what have I learned in this? um like I feel like I'm just learning as I go and learning. Luckily, I'm a pretty organized person, so that helps a lot, especially with like accounting and invoicing, all those things.
Mm.
But learning to be uncomfortable, learning to realize like, hey, I don't know what I'm doing, reaching out for help when you need it. But it's all, I have to say, like it lights. I learned especially about myself that I'm super competitive and that I love winning and that I love going for the chase. I love putting myself out there. If I'm doing like 10 to 20 auditions a day, right? Like that's just part of the process, but like I love just taking a shot every single day, right? Um Entrepreneurship itself. Yeah, I just it's a lot harder than I think people think it is. I would say like once a month, a couple times a month, people will reach out to me and be like, "Hey, I'd love to do some like voiceover on the side," which is totally fine. I'm happy to like offer up, but I don't think people realize how hard it is. Like to give you an idea, just voiceover alone, you know how hard podcasting is, right? You know how many pieces that takes to do a professional podcast, right?
Mhm.
It's not just turn on the microphone and then you're good. There's so much planning around it. So voiceover alone, right? So it's kind of chicken and egg situation. Like, sure, you need good equipment and a good sound treated, because like that's a huge part of it. But you also need good quality demos. But then you also need to, so where do you get the demos from? You have to pay for the demos, or do you have to practice, or like where do you get jobs from? And there's so many different avenues to it, and you're constantly learning and upgrading and figuring it out. Um, and then so I think it's constantly just learning and figuring out how to upgrade your business, what is worth investing money into. At this point, I'm still a sole proprietor. I'd love to incorporate in the next couple of years. Learning about that, right? Learning about taxes, learning about write-offs, learning about
Yeah.
all that dumb stuff that I don't want to. But it's all I know is that it's all really important. And when I don't know the answer, to reach out and ask for help is a big part of it. Or as I love to say, everything is figure outable. That's one of the things I try to remind myself. Everything is figure outable.
I don't, the one thing that I figured out about myself is way better to get someone in there that knows what they're doing, and there's this whole fractional world where you can get a really strong bookkeeper, or because
Mm.
I think early days I tried to do too much by myself, and I found that to be really challenging. And
What do you struggle with? Like, what do you need help with?
Everything. Well, like communication like I got,
Yeah.
really good people. I mean, we've grown over the years, so
Mhm.
just people that play, to their strengths. So like, for example, like having Jean supporting our tech on this would be really critical because Emily and I would be, it would be a disaster if we were trying to do that. As an example, like, and I look at the business, we made some mistakes early on where it's not someone's skill set who did the bookkeeping, and then year end we go and the accountant goes, it's going to cost us like 10 grand just to figure this stuff out. Like if I made that half that investment in a good bookkeeper, would have been fine, right? So those are the things, just you know getting a good lawyer to look at contracts, all those kind of things.
Mhm.
That's been my personal experiences, and just and probably because I'm not maybe as disciplined as it sounds like you are, and like I'll try to figure stuff out. I'm like, oh my god, this is way over my head. So, but then knowing what you are good at and try to stay in that lane to the degree you can.
Yeah,
I
Emily,
don't
what
know.
about
Does that
you?
make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. Yeah.
Yeah. I,
It works for me. It works for me.
yeah.
But
Mm.
it's not to suggest everyone should do it that way. But that's certainly because it's kind of that whole concept of leverage what you're really confident and
Mhm.
good at, and then but that doesn't mean you're not scaring yourself and doing new things and as
Mhm.
well. Sorry,
Yeah.
Emily. I cut you off.
No, I mean, I am big on outsourcing for sure. There are certain things that I have no interest in doing and people are really good at. So yeah, when it comes to accountants and bookkeepers and like in it, otherwise I would spend so much time trying to figure it out. And I love to figure things out and do things on my own, but recognizing of where is my time most valuable and not
Mhm.
just to me, but ultimately for other people.
Mhm.
And so even with coaching, it's like if I'm spending X amount of time trying to figure out my own invoicing and all of that kind of stuff and bookkeeping, then I'm taking time away that I can be coaching clients or giving a keynote or doing this and like
Mhm.
other things that like I can create more of an impact on.
Mhm. Yeah, one of the things that I find really impactful is I teamed up with a great company here called Sound Off. My friend Matt Kundle, who was in the radio industry forever, but he runs a podcast company here, and his team actually like edits my podcast for me, helps like I do probably they do the actual editing, but like I do the rest of it, right? But that saves me like I could technically edit my own podcast. I know I have the skills for it, but like, oh, I just don't have I don't want to do it. Or if I'm like voicing an audiobook or a long narration, like I would much rather outsource a producer. And at the same time, I'm sure Emily, you agree too, then you're supporting other entrepreneurs and
Yeah.
other people as well. And I have a friend who is a great producer, and I've been like, referring her to other people to produce like demos, and I'll be hiring her myself for stuff. So I'm at in the beginning though, it's really hard though to be like, oh, like, I'm not really making more, like I can't really afford it. But you're like, so it's like it's this give and take. It depends where you are, it depends what the budget looks like. It's just yeah, it's for me right now, it's still figuring out like what am I spending money on, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
I mean, it'll be interesting to talk to you in 10 years from now, but I suspect that probably won't change. It'll be a different thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because you'll be, and like at least that's my experience. Is there's always something, and you're like, is that a worthwhile investment? And
Hmm.
so it's certainly tricky. But I think there's a real advantage to just not having just having a very narrow set of skills, like in my case. And there's
Hmm.
all this stuff I'm like, man, I have no idea how to like put up a website, like no clue.
Hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
and,
Right.
and I feel bad for people like sounds like yourself. And I don't know if Emily, I think Emily's maybe more in my camp,
Yeah.
but they can do a whole bunch of things. That's like, to me, that's the curse, right? Because
Yeah.
it's, even in my house, it's like, I have no idea how to fix that. I don't have the tools,
Yeah.
but I know some really good people that are really good at doing the stuff, and we'll do it in half the time and it'll actually work, whatever that thing
Hmm.
is. I'm pointing to the cabinet right there over there that's been broke, busted for probably 3 weeks. So,
Yeah.
Well, I
um,
do. I was just
sorry,
gonna
go
say
ahead.
I have a virtual assistant who helps me with. She's wonderful. She helps me with marketing and helps me out with like ideas and writing. And she's also just one of those people that like pokes me and she's like, "Hey, we need to do this. Like, hey, you
Mm.
said you want to start a newsletter for your podcast. Are we doing that?" I'm like, "Ugh," right? I'm just like, "Fine." But at
Yeah.
this point too, it's like, I'm not like creating socks or something. Like at this point, like my voice and like you're coaching Emily, like my voice is my product, right? When I'm turning around auditions, I don't have time to set off like when I do auditions, I turn them around within like an hour, within like, they're fast. So I have to do a lot of stuff on my own, and I am the product. I am the face of my podcast. I'm the voice of my
Yeah.
podcast, right? So it's also hard to, especially when like your voice, like that's a part of it, right? Like that's what you're selling is you, right?
Yeah. And then how important it is to have the right team, because
Mhm.
when you are your own personal brand, then you have to have a team that can really see that.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, definitely. So
Actually, can we dig into that? Like, I know you've talked about this, Emily, and I'd be curious what you both, but like, and you talked about like, getting over self-doubt and all these sorts of things, like like everyone.
Mhm.
Um, I expect it's even harder if you are the brand.
mhm,
You know what I
Well,
mean? Like,
yeah.
it's easier, like at least in my experience, when you're promoting, and part of why I said vision coaching, not veil coaching, is because it's somehow if someone's saying no to that, it feels less personal, even though, on some level, like how does that play in for you, both of you?
Because I feel like Emily and I are in the same camp when it comes to like Emily, like you are a brand, right? Like
mhm.
yeah, you totally get it. Uh, okay, sorry. So I was saying, what's the question again? I just like,
Well, I just thinking about how self-doubt plays. It could, it's probably
yeah,
a bigger monster when it's like it's already
right,
there. We already are, all of us are dealing with it
right.
on some level, I would expect. But I would just say, like, kind of going to that when you're the brand and someone's
Mhm.
saying no to your voiceover, they're, on some level it must feel very personal. And so, what's the process to
Mm.
not take it personally and to not, let that inner critic just, kind of start to grow and tell you you're, not worthy of this business or whatever. Like, what do
Sure.
what are your guys' strategies to get through that?
Um, so I would say podcasting and voiceover are a little bit different. So voiceover is very much for me, and I've kind of, there's some roles that I audition for, and I'm like, I want this so bad. This is perfect for me. Don't get it, right? Like, um, but for most of the time, I send it off and forget about it because that is so unhealthy to hang on to those. How I look at it, if like a casting director is like, how I look at it is like maybe you were chicken that day and they wanted steak.
Hmm.
So that's how I look at it, is like weren't what they needed, or maybe you weren't showing up the way you should have today. So that's why it's really important to like show up the best as yourself, because they're also hiring like your voice and like and what you bring to the script, right? So it's definitely personal too, and like sometimes you get a little pang, right? Like say my agent's like, "Hey, you were shortlisted for this." He's like, "Hey, you didn't get it." There's like that, ooh, but as long as I'm in a good mood that day, that'll fuel me forward, right? But with podcasting, like I'm just signing on my third sponsor next week, which is like absolutely wild, with some really really great brands. But it's like that's hard. That's also hard for me too. So that is hard for me when I'm like pitching sponsorships, is because like the podcast is kind of like my heart outside of my body, and it's like something like I love so much, and it's so like creative and personal to me in those conversations, like Emily would know. So that's a little bit tougher because there's so much more, like every time I output something, there's so much like there's all of me is in the output and in that audio and what I'm creating, right? Um but generally speaking, like I think I have a pretty healthy confidence in what I'm doing, that I'm good enough, that sometimes I'm just not the flavor that they need.
Yeah,
Emily?
a lot of therapy. I'm not even joking.
Yes.
No, I
And
know
work
that. I know you're not joking because you talk about it. That's what
Yeah.
and
makes it.
working with a coach.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, definitely that like that steak or chicken analogy. And that I think for sure, Dave, to your question, that it can sometimes it could be easy to take it personal. And for me, it took me a long time. And I think I still am kind of accepting that, like, no, Emily Roger is the brand.
Hmm.
And so that, yeah, if I get asked to do a keynote and then we, do an interview and then I don't get picked for it. And there for sure can be that feeling immediately of, but why not? But then it's always at the end, I'm like, oh, that actually wasn't the fit for me. And that
Hmm.
is okay. And it's the same as like, maybe it's for coaching. There are hundreds of thousands of phenomenal coaches out there. And I want other people to have what's best for them, the same as I would want who is best for me in whatever given season that is.
Mhm.
And yeah, to not kind of let those things get to you. It's like I actually had a client reach out yesterday who I had an intro call with like, gosh, a year and a half ago. And then like, yeah, yesterday they're like, oh yeah, I'm ready to start coaching. And it's like, oh, okay, cool. Like you never know
Yeah.
when things are going to unfold. And everything you learn from everything is experience. And yeah, like Mary Anne and I asked ahead of time if we could or if I can mention it just because of client confidentiality, but
Mhm.
you were a client, a coaching client of mine after
Mhm.
we met. Um, and I remember those initial conversations before podcasting was even a thought for you.
Mhm.
And you were like, should I invest in a microphone? like, like
It
those
was
were the
so early. It was so early in days. Yeah. Yeah.
now, like it's not even 2 years later. And
Yeah.
yeah, wow.
Yeah.
Signing your third sponsor, like awesome.
Yeah. And we mentioned coaching a couple times already and coaching with you, but what's wild is like actually looking back at those conversations and remembering our conversations. And I think just having your support was such a big part of that, right? Having your support and like the belief in me and that I could do it. But also a big part of why I loved coaching so much with you was that it's like even just like connecting with other entrepreneurs and being like you're not alone is such a
Mm,
huge part of like the confidence, right? I think it's really important to build a network of other people in what you're doing. Like I have like several different kind of pockets of other voiceover artists that I connect with on a regular basis. Otherwise, when you work from home and you are working alone, you're technically working alone, that can get like one of the things I miss most is like people and coworkers, right? So I think it's really important to connect with people and being like, oh, I'm not alone and these struggles are very normal, because it's really easy to get into your head. It's really easy to get into your head. But it's also fascinating for me. I love connecting with people in different areas and different pockets because um, the same struggles of entrepreneurship are across the board. It doesn't have to be in voiceover. It doesn't have to be in audio. It could be anything. It could be like a bakery. It could be anything. But there, again, it's like we're all kind of in this together and figuring it out.
I joined a peer group, and they're all different from different businesses, different sectors, all
Cool.
entrepreneurs. And we've been meeting, I don't know, 4 times, 5 times a year for we're going on, I think we're going to our 11th year. And it's not just about the business, but it's also about our personal lives, and it's a confidential forum. So on top of one-to-one coaching, I agree with you wholeheartedly, Mary Anne. It's so nice to connect and hear someone else's challenges or wins or whatever.
Hmm.
And they have stuff to impart, and say, oh yeah, I went through that, here's some thoughts you can consider, or you can share. It's just that whole yeah, so it's such an important thing. And because a lot of time it isn't lonely. It's
yeah,
lonely.
It's
It
super
can be if
lonely.
you're not careful.
yeah,
Um,
definitely. Yeah.
can I share something that actually I work with this great coach. I'm going to shout out
Yeah.
to her, Barb Richards. She lives on the West Coast, and she's a master certified coach. She's just brilliant. But I was talking about we're launching some new services, and they feel very personal. And I think we were talking about creative tension, and she said something that I heard both of you kind of describe. I think is that I think she had read it, but this idea of like when you're sending something out that's that creative tension is around caring about something very deeply, but also the ability to detach from
Mm,
it. And I think that's what I'm hearing in the way you guys are describing, like,
Mhm.
and it's, I don't, how to do that exactly, I don't know, but it's almost depersonalizing it, like, and using examples like they're looking for steak and I'm chicken kind of thing, right?
Right.
So yeah, very cool just to make that connection.
yeah, definitely. So Mary Ann, your podcast, let's take this outside. It is like, gosh, I like binge listen to your episodes. For one, you're a phenomenal host.
Thank you.
And your guests who you have on are incredible, sharing just really cool adventure stories. So,
Mhm.
what was your reason for starting the podcast?
So I always joke that it was started out of peer pressure, which is 100% true. Who I referred to earlier, Matt, he was like, "You should start a podcast. You should start a podcast," and was kind of like bugging me about it. And we at that point we had connected about voiceover, but he had this podcast company. I'm like, I will eventually. I'm still trying to figure it out. And then I was like, I'm ready. I want it to be about the outdoors. I want it to be about nature. I just knew exactly what I wanted to do, and it was such a seamless transition into it. And Let's Take This Outside came pretty easily. Like the title came pretty easily, and I like to say I think it's a pretty clever title
I think it's,
for a
I love
Very
it.
podcast.
I love it. I think it's like I'm glad you brought that up because that's so perfect. Because I'm like, what's this about, right? So well done.
Right. Yeah. And it's funny because um it's I'm still in the process of perfecting it, and I think it will always be that way. But luckily, I have a great production team that helped put it together, and a friend of mine voiced the intro, and so luckily it sounded professional right off the bat. Like I have confidence in my skills and my interviewing skills, and like I have access to great guests right away. And what's so cool is other people recommend other people. Like Emily, I think you recommended a couple guests already that have been really, really great. So I find that people just want to be like, oh, you should talk to this person or this person or this person. But yeah, it's been our birthday, the anniversary of Let's Take This Outside is in March. I don't know exactly when this is airing, but which is absolutely crazy because I can't believe it's got to this point and that people want to support it. Like, for example, one of my sponsors is called Outward Bound Training Academy for outdoor professionals. So I believe they're government funded, but essentially they have been doing training for years for young adults who want to work in the outdoors. And what they're doing is phenomenal. And their spring and fall programs are about diversity and making sure that that their training programs have people who aren't just white people, which you see a lot of in the outdoors, right? It's a lot of that. So I'm really excited to partner with like people who also believe in making the outdoors more diverse, more accessible is a huge part of it too, because it's something I love. Like even something like e-bikes, for example. Some people are like, "Oh, I'm so against e-bikes," but I'm like, what if someone has like mobility issues and they want to go biking with their friends, or maybe they're older and they were a triathlete for years and now like their their joints ache and they just want to get outside. My guess is I'll probably be on an e-bike by the time I'm like in my 70s or 80s, right? So a big part, like, so I'm my passion for it and like what I want to talk about and what kind of guests I want to have keeps evolving as well. So I'm really excited to see where it goes in the next few years. Like I'm just setting up an interview right now, knock on wood that it goes through, but with her name is Lakpa Sherpa, and she has summited Everest the most of any woman ever. She's summited Everest 13 times, right? And I'm really, really excited to chat with her. So I have some very cool guests coming up. And yeah, no, I'm really excited about it because like it's mine. It's like my content that I am putting out and people genuinely like connect with it. And you can tell that I'm like get excited. I'm like, because people are like, oh, I listen. But here's the thing about podcasts is like, I think if people say you're putting it out a podcast, and I think if your friends want to support you, they listen once, right? They listen once, and if they really like it, they will keep listening. But most people will like listen as a favor. But the fact that people keep listening means like, oh, it's actually good, and people actually want to consume this. So I feel very vulnerable that people actually want to listen to this content that I'm putting out.
Or binge listening as Emily did. So
Yeah,
that
that's
says
nice.
something.
Yeah. Well, and what I love so much about it, Mary Anne, is that like, and I wonder if I didn't know you personally and have this, is that like your energy that you bring is just palpable. It's like I hear your voice and I start laughing. I mean, it's like even every time we get on the phone, we just automatically start to giggle. It's what we do. And
Yeah.
then we settle down and get into our conversation. But it's that passion that is behind it. And when you can just really be, and when you are just really genuine about something, then I think that really resonates with people. And you bring that to your podcast and to everything that you do.
Thanks. I think authenticity and being genuine is a great way to connect with people, right? I think that's a huge part of the podcast and business and how you interact with clients and hosts or guests or whoever it may be, right?
What's the biggest thing looking back from when you were given that email? What's the biggest thing that you have learned about yourself throughout this time?
Hmm. I think I already knew this, being an adventurer, right? You do hard things, right? I think that like I'm impressed with what I can do. I think I've learned that I'm like, oh, I can figure things out and make it work. Um, that's something I've learned and something that I have to tell myself. And maybe Dave, back to your question about like, what do you tell yourself when those self doubt moments come in? Is like, oh, you will make it work, right? That is kind of what I've learned is like, you have made it work for, last year and a half, 2 years. You will keep, if you're making it work up to this point, you will keep making it work. That's one of the things I've learned is that I have the capacity and I have the skills and I have the passion, and I have the drive, and I have those things to make it work.
Yeah. Yeah, you do.
It builds some confidence too, right? Knowing that and
Yeah.
saying that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So how do people learn more about you,
Sure.
get in touch with you, sponsors, reach out to you, that sort of thing?
Sure. So let's take this outside.ca is my podcast website. ivisonvoice.com is my voiceover website. So ivison.com. Oh, sorry, ivisonvoice.com. I'm sure you'll put it in the notes. I'm sure you put it somewhere. That's for voiceover. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Twitter. I'm on LinkedIn. You just kind of find me anywhere. And I would love to chat about entrepreneurship or the outdoors. If you have a great guest idea, if you want to hire me for voiceover work too, you've had like an hour of examples here. So I'd be happy to, I'd be happy to chat.
Thank you so much, Mary Anne. Yeah, I'm really happy to have you on here, and that we get to share you with all of the listeners.
Thank you for having me. And I kind of have a little bit of imposter syndrome because I know you've had some really cool guests, but I'm like, I guess I belong. This is nice.
I mean, I could say the same thing for me being on your podcast.
Perfect fit.
And so at the end of each episode, we do takeaways. So Dave, what are you taking away today from our conversation with Mary Anne?
There's so much. There's a bunch. I think from the moment Mary Anne showed up on the screen, I just felt she's very relatable, and that idea of authenticity that she just brought up, and the fact that just this thing, or we can be enough. We're resilient, and just tying into that, but also being confident enough to say, yeah, there's sometimes I have self-doubt creeps in. So it's kind of those themes really resonate with me, and I'm looking forward to checking out the podcast.
I hope it lives up to your expectations.
Yeah.
How about you, Emily?
You'll really love it. Yeah, the same. So many takeaways. For one, is that just that, like, yeah, the power in just being you, and the world needs you as you, professionally, personally, across the board. Show up as you. And this thing around like resisting the resistance. Mary Anne, like you and I meeting while we're skate skiing, and all three of us are very active people, very involved in sport, and we work out and we train, and we're constantly like going against resistance willingly to get stronger, to build stamina, to build strength, to build endurance. So we do it on this physical level, yet being able to tap into that even more on that personal, emotional, mental level, that like everything that we come up against, whether it is those self-doubts or those negative beliefs or like opposition from other people, that it's all just resistance, and that like we train ourselves to go against that resistance. And that ultimately, like, yeah, for you, Mary Anne, like you resisted your resistance to start a podcast, to do voiceovers, to all of that stuff. And here you are. It just like, love it.
Well, thank you for the support. And my takeaways is that I love you, Emily. And
Aw.
I'm assuming the guest is not supposed to do takeaways.
No, but you can go for it.
See, it happened. It just happened.
You're the new guest / host, Mary Anne. Yeah, what is
I
your
I was waiting for that to happen.
Did you know it was going to happen? I'm like, well, my takeaway. I'm like, I know I'm not.
It took till the very end, but it happened.
I knew. I'm like, I'm just going to piss them off. Wait a second. My takeaway is that I love you, Emily, and my takeaway for Dave. Dave, I love how curious you are.
This is the laughing you guys talk about.
Yeah, we're nerds. Anyway.
So on that note, Mary Anne, why don't you end the podcast for us? Just take it away. Genevieve, you are like
I don't know any of the tags for the social media. I'm so sorry. What's the website?
Either do I. That's why John.
It's okay. It's okay. That's why I'm here. And it's hilarious because you guys didn't even notice where Mary Anne was actually throwing in her questions throughout the interview of going, Dave, what's your thoughts on that? She's just so natural at it.
That's good.
So
yeah.
it's perfect. It's perfect. And so we're going to have all of that information. We will, Mary Anne, put all of your information listed, and the best place for people to find that is on our website, boilingpointpodcast.com. We are active on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. We put the video versions up on YouTube and Facebook. And of course, the podcast is available on all your favorite podcast channels.
So good.
On that note, go get outside.
Take it outside. See you guys.
Yeah. Thank you. See you next time.
Nice meeting you again. Take care.
Thank you for listening. Follow or subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app or visit boilingpointpodcast.com for more.